Hey folks, this is Rebel Rousing Rich Bergeron.
You just broke up, but it's the Tornado Tony Pentacle.
And second, Tom Pettit. Right crystal ball.
All right. Well, we had a little bit of a discussion last week about Stephen A. And it's been quite the turnaround this last week. Kind of like another story I read about the NFL. Now all of a sudden the NFL is reaching out to Antonio Brown because they're worried about him. It's kind of weird. But Stephen A. Smith last week, everybody was like, he don't know shit, he should shut up about fighting. And the whole time I kind of was in the back of my mind thinking, well, you know, Dana White does the same thing, and nobody criticizes him to this level. And you could argue he doesn't really know that much about fighting, considering all he ever did was box, really. And he didn't even really do much of that competitively. But anyway, so I discovered this little video clip that is worth for just hearing the audio. And I'm going to play it. It's a little over 8 minutes of Chael Sonnen and his perspective on the Stephen A. Smith versus Joe Rogan feud that has now started to develop to the point of them actually having serious conversations in the media about these two guys fighting each other. But this is a pretty interesting take from Chael Sonnen, who actually works for ESPN and knows Stephen A. Smith personally. But here we go. Let's listen and we'll talk. If it plays.
Stephen A. Smith was gracious enough to come on and cover Conor versus Cowboy. When I tell you gracious enough, I don't know this is an absolute fact, but I do not believe that Stephen A. Smith has any kind of a contract to cover MMA. I believe somebody at ESPN said, hey, Stephen A. Okay. This is a big week, and you're a big deal. And if you participated, it could move us to the next level. And I have a feeling Stephen A. said, send me to Vegas, I'll help out. Now, the reason I say that I do not think that he was hired to do this role is because I can tell you with 100% certainty, when ESPN and UFC kicked off, which was on January 18th of last year in Brooklyn, Cejudo versus Dillashaw, I can tell you for sure Stephen A. drove to Brooklyn on his own and participated in the festivities on the house as a team player to ESPN. I can tell you that is 100% fact. So when he came out to Vegas, I could be wrong and there's something to do there. But I do think that the reason Stephen A. is participating is relevant, which is he is participating because he cares and because he helps. Stephen A. is helpful, and the one thing that does seem to be missed by many MMA fans, and the fans aren't wrong to want to protect the guys. Generally, the fans turn on the guys. Generally, it's the fans that are going, putting their finger in somebody's chest or, kicking some sand in their face. The fans aren't wrong to want to protect the guys. I just want to make sure that the fans do understand Stephen A. is there because he's helpful. And if you are a fighter and Stephen A. Smith is talking about you, it's a big deal. That is something that would be exciting for you. To put that in perspective in a different way, that maybe you would understand differently. If you're a fighter and you win, and you see Joe Rogan come into the ring with a microphone, which means you're going to get a post-fight interview, that is an exciting moment for you. That's a very big deal to be interviewed post-fight, and is not something that is a foregone conclusion. It has to be earned. You could be a main card fight, and that fight is a dud, and they will not come to a post-fight interview. That is a very real thing. So when you see Joe get into the ring with a microphone, you're happy. When Stephen A. Smith goes on ESPN as the highest-rated member of the entire network, which is known as the worldwide leader because it is, it's an exciting moment. Now, you also must understand when Stephen A. comes on and talks MMA, he is very clear at some point in each one of those conversations to reveal to the audience, I am not an expert. I am a fan who witnessed something, and I'm going to speak about what I witnessed, and I'm going to speak about my interpretation and my opinion of what I just saw. without question, Stephen A. is skilled and has the credentials to do just that, but he discloses it up front, and so many people do miss that disclosure. Stephen A. ends up in some kind of headlines over saying he was disgusted by the Cowboy versus Conor fight. I was part of that interview, and before Stephen A. said that, or immediately following that, he did look to Michael Bisping and I, who were his partners up there, and said, "You guys are the experts. I'm a fan. I love basketball. I used to do some boxing, but I watch you guys." And here's what I saw, and I'm disgusted at the fact that Donald Cerrone wasn't able to get off. I'm disgusted at the fact that Donald Cerrone, once he was hit and hurt, did not step back to grab a moment, create some space, or come in and grab a hold of Conor and regain his thoughts. I think the misinterpretation is people said that Cerrone was disgusting, or that Stephen A. found that disgusting. No. He was in many ways complimenting Cowboy. He even went on to finish that thought and say, "I know Cowboy knows how to do these things. I know how he knows how to fight. I've watched him fight 50 men. I've watched him win 18 of the night bonuses. I'm well aware he holds 11 distinctions for records within the UFC. I'm disgusted on his behalf that he now has to go and live with this performance where he wasn't thinking clear enough to either step back to gain his wits or step in, hold, and take a couple of deep breaths." So just to be clear on what the words that were said, at no point did Stephen A. come on and bury Donald Cerrone. That's just not what happened. It's just not.
All right, stop it there. We don't have to listen to the whole 8 minutes. That's about half of it. And I think he makes a compelling argument. I mean, I don't really particularly like Stephen A. myself. I think he's a little arrogant, but, I mean, that's his character.
He's
so it gets him
arrogant.
viewers.
He will sometimes, go a little out of line, but, a little out of line sometimes get your ratings.
Right. And obviously, what Chael's kind of revealing there, more than anything, I think that's important, is that this is a guy that, he's not necessarily even connected to MMA or fighting, but he cares enough to attend it and try to use his fame to promote it. And, he's got good interests at heart. A lot of people just saw the way that he dismantled Cerrone as like, oh, this is just some fanboy spouting off like he knows everything, And the biggest criticism in the last week that I did see was that, this idea that Donald Cerrone should have just backed up. Like, what would have changed if he backed up? Like, basically a lot of people are saying that that's really not relevant, Like, obviously, you can't predict what would have been the response from McGregor to that. It's kind of like you can't change history. So, I mean, if you look back,
backing up would put him into kicking range.
Yeah.
I mean, McGregor was really right on point with his head kick. So you can't say what the right strategy should have been.
No. So yeah, you can knock him for that, but just knock him for that. You don't have to just tear him to pieces for everything. But that's another point, too, that Chael makes, is that he did, at one point, say, hey, I'm just a fan, And it's kind of like, a lot of people do miss that caveat, or that, introduction that some people give when they're invited into these situations and they're surrounded by people who know what they're talking about, and you're just the color guy, Not saying anything about his race, but I mean color commentary.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those situations. He's an outsider. He criticized somebody that's been in the business a while, and a lot of people are trying to protect the fighters. But the thing that I can't stop thinking about in this situation is Dana White does this shit every day. He badmouths his own fighters all the time, and he really doesn't know a shitload himself about fighting other than what he's learned from watching the UFC unfold, and being a part of that. And he's practiced jiu-jitsu a little bit, and he's boxed before, but he couldn't compete because he gets basically slapped by a punch in the ear that changed his whole life, and it made him into a boxercise instructor, as the legend goes. And as his boxercise instructor is where he met Chuck Liddell.
I love that phrase. I love that phrase, Rich. I'm going to hear that sentence forever.
But that's what he was. That's his first job in Vegas. That's literally what he was. He was a boxercise instructor. And that's how he met Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz, and got his management career started, and then found out from them that the UFC was being sold, pitched it to the Fertitta brothers. It's amazing, like, how many people don't know the history of how this purchase came about, and the fact that Dana actually lost $40 million, or the whole organization itself lost $40 million. Well, Dana was in charge of it at first because he was really thrown into this with no knowledge whatsoever. And he developed his knowledge through the School of Hard Knocks, kind of like I did when I had to become my own fucking lawyer, partially because of shit that Dana White did. So, I mean, people forget that, too. This guy just stepped out of nowhere and just all of a sudden became an expert. And really, if you look at it, considering his background and his lack of any competition, the "do you want to be a fucking fighter" speech is complete bullshit, because he never was one. And he's telling a bunch of real killers that they don't want to be fucking fighters because they don't want to do the house rules or whatever at the time that they were argued about. So it's unreal. But Stephen A. Smith does come with the popularity and the background of being an expert in a lot of different sports and debating people over sports, and he really is somebody that has his finger on the pulse of the entire sports industry. And Chael also says at some point in the video that, hey, this is a situation where the UFC goes around saying they want mainstream support, and then they get a mainstream guy to go out there and participate in an event, and they shit on him. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. Take your pick your poison. You either get mainstream exposure, or you're gonna sit there and criticize it. That's not gonna help you in that situation. But anyway, Joe Rogan and Stephen A. have had a couple barbs here and there, and maybe that will be good for his ratings too. But I don't know. They have to work together. They'll have to work together again. So I don't know how that's going to go over. I doubt they'll have a physical confrontation. They'll be professional about it, but it's hard to imagine them not being in a position to say something to each other the next time they're on the broadcast, and if it's like a live mic, it could get pretty interesting itself. But I don't know. I don't know if they'll ever be in that position again. It might be a situation like with ESPN and Teddy Atlas. And he had that thing with Mark Kriegel. He had a little argument about the same thing, basically. Kriegel doesn't know shit about boxing, I think, was the basic argument from Teddy, and they got into a tiff, and now you don't see Teddy on the air anymore with Mark at all. Hardly ever. Teddy got kind of distanced because of that. And many other things, obviously. He's very controversial in some of his statements about the promoters and the fixing of decisions and all that. But anyway, Joe Rogan is basically, he came out first and kind of started this feud. And he said, this is his exact word, "Someone needs to explain to me what's happening here. It looks like he's punching a baby." And this is talking about them watching his pad work. Because that's the other thing that's going around. Stephen A. Smith working on the pads with some guy and doing horribly. You can't deny that. But anyway, he says this guy should not be allowed to talk about fighting.
It was pretty bad.
And then he goes on to say, you called the guy a quitter who, first of all, had a broken orbital bone. You're saying he was a quitter. He got cracked by one of the biggest punches in the sport. He has the most wins in the UFC. He has the most wins by finish. He has the most bonuses. I mean, come on. He has the most fights. You're calling that guy a quitter? He got cracked. That's what happens. So that's Joe's perspective. And, you gotta love Joe. He's been doing the stand-up comedy a lot. He does a part of it for the act, too. To get the ratings. He likes drama and stirring shit up. So who knows how much of this is actually serious being pissed off and, how much of it is just trying to get ratings and, trying to feed off a popular topic that other people have kind of got him incensed about. But he's obviously got a personal interest because he's been watching it for a lot longer than Stephen A. Smith has and commentating on it. So I'm just real curious to see how their first meeting will go face-to-face after this little tip behind the scenes. That's all. I want to be the fly on the wall for that. I want to see the UFC embedded for that one. Anyway. Here's an interesting story about boxing. I had no idea this thing was going on, but you guys heard of boxing promoter Greg Cohen? I've actually put a lot of stuff on our blog about him. Greg Cohen, Cohen. Just like that. I think that's the same spelling.
No, the name's not ringing a bell.
It's the same spelling as Trump's lawyer there that went to jail. But Greg Cohen was a little bit of a boxing promoter, and he's in a lot of trouble now. He got busted on wire fraud, and he's supposed to report to prison February 7th now. But basically the gist of it is he had some situation where he was needing money, and strangely enough, not a lot of his fighters are speaking out badly about the situation, and some of them are sticking with him without hesitation. But the basic allegations here that led to this situation was he pitched somebody with an idea for an investment. He wanted to invest some money in something, and he told them that he was going to get the investment through this brokerage company, and this expert said it was going to go through the roof, one of those situations. So he ended up with a few $100,000 in this investment, and then kept putting the guy off. And then finally the guy called the actual brokerage house and found out there was never an investment. Typical white-collar fraud. And now he's got to go to jail for it. But a couple of his boxers actually came out and had nothing but nice things to say, basically. Like, he'll have it figured out, we're not worried, and it's all good. So I'd be pretty worried. Anyway, I can't get it to load right now for some reason. And when I do, I will get the names of those guys. And the other big crossover story this week, we kind of hinted about this last week at the end of the show. We didn't quite know if it was serious or not. But it is serious. Bob Arum wants his fighter Terence Crawford to go and fight Conor McGregor in the octagon and in the boxing ring. And the funniest story of the week is when Bob Arum came out later on after the initial announcement that he was thinking about this idea and said that Terence Crawford could win by pin. He could pin him, which is not going to win you an MMA match.
Yeah.
Maybe a wrestling.
Bob getting his combat sports confused.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if he does a flying leg drop from the turnbuckle, maybe he could pin him. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if anything off the top rope or off the top of the cage is allowed in MMA. But it would make it interesting, wouldn't it? Get a guy incapacitated for long enough, and you get to climb up on the freaking cage and jump off of it. Yeah. That would talk about ratings, boy. Tag team MMA has already been tried, but if you got to come in from over the top of the cage, that would make it interesting. So yeah, that's a serious deal. That's a serious discussion, which makes you think that has to mean that Bob Arum is really desperate to make money. Because number one, he fucking hates Dana White. He's gone on the record and said nasty things about Dana White in the UFC. So for him to offer up an opportunity to give the UFC an interest and a way to make money off of one of his best-known fighters, that's a big step for Bob Arum to take if he's not desperate. You know what I mean?
That's the Grand Canyon, buddy. That is the Grand Canyon.
But Terrence Crawford is one of those guys that nobody wants to fight at the same time. So why not just say, all right, well, let's give him a gimmick fight and see what he does. But anyway, Arum says, you've got an elite boxer in Terrence Crawford fighting an elite MMA guy in Conor McGregor under MMA rules. You don't think that would be interesting and something the public would want to see? I think it's very realistic. He says, whenever they are ready, we are ready. We do MMA fight first, if that's what they want. Which is interesting. Crawford, undefeated, 36-0, 27 knockouts. He's one of the most elite welterweights in the PBC stable. And, Errol Spence and Manny Pacquiao have not been able to sign agreements to fight him yet. And Arum doesn't have a welterweight in his own stable that's worthy of facing the guy, according to this article. But anyway, his last fight was a 9th-round stoppage of Lithuania's Egidijus Kavaliauskas, who was 21-1 with one draw and 17 knockouts. That was December 14th, and that was a demolition. That guy was tough, had a good chin, but no match for Crawford. Anyway, he wrestled in middle school, which is not what I heard. I thought it was high school, but this says he wrestled in middle school. I don't know how much you would remember from middle school. But, the takedown and the takedown defense is obviously going to be the most important part of MMA for a guy coming over to boxing, from boxing. You already got the hands down. Takedown defense is going to be your most valuable skill. So, if he remembers a lot of that, he'll be okay. I don't know. That's a tough one. Anyway, here's an interesting one. You guys have heard of situations, of course, in the past where we have regulators of the sports, the boxing commission and the MMA commissioners and all these people with the regulating boards that show up to MMA events to supervise and do their duties or whatever. Well, sometimes they get a little bit of perks. They get to have a guest. Well, this one guy in Detroit decided that he wouldn't give him free parking, so he came in and literally threatened to shut down the entire event because they didn't give him free parking. Lansing, Michigan. A member of Michigan's commission that regulates boxing and mixed martial arts allegedly threatened to shut down an event in November after not receiving free parking. A guy's name is Bruce Hundley, member of the state's Unarmed Combat Commission. He says the situation was a misunderstanding, but the commission's then chairman, Jeff Stiers, labeled it intentional in a November 20th message to state officials. And he said, I believe it was flagrant, intentional, and follows a trend set forth by Mr. Hundley that undermines the integrity of this commission. This isn't the first charge against this guy. He's also come to events before and demanded that people be thrown out of seats so he could sit there. And he's always brought a guest, and it's somebody that's not participating as a regulator. But anyway. In March, The governor gave the commission new power to act independently of the State Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, which housed the commission, but less than a year later, one of the commission's members, Hundley, is facing allegations from event promoters, and Stiers revealed he is stepping down from his chairman post a day after the news asked him about Hundley. So now this guy is still in there, and the chairman stepped down because of his bullshit. So, yeah, he's done a lot of damage with this little stunt of his. But anyway, it was at a November 16th mixed martial arts event in Lansing. He and a guest, this guy Hundley, attended the event. When he entered the venue, Hundley allegedly asked Pete Keung, who runs Total Warrior Combat, why he was charged $5 for parking. Hundley then said that if he wants, he doesn't have to pay because he'll just shut down the show anytime he wishes. So then the promoter said, this is the one big reason why I'm contemplating not having another show ever again in the state of Michigan. Having commissioners threaten and maybe have the power to close down my shows because the venue charged them a parking fee is unreasonable. So, Hundley was appointed to the commission in 2018 by Rick Snyder and said the incident was a total misunderstanding. Keung was under pressure because an ambulance needed on standby at the event was running late, the commissioner said. We were standing there joking around, said Hundley. Hundley said Keung took his joke the wrong way and he's willing to apologize. But Stiers apparently didn't take the matter as a joke. Former professional, he's a former professional fighter too, Stiers, the guy that used to chair the commission. He said this week he was very familiar with it, but declined to comment further because he said the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs is investigating. So yeah, dick move of the week right there, I guess you could call it. That's a bad one. That's a bit of a temper tantrum. I think he should be impeached. That's abuse of power. Call the Senate. Anyway. So we got boxing to talk about. Tony pointed out there is a card going on right now on DAZN. DAZN. Yeah, I should start calling it by the proper term. Reminds me of when I got in trouble with... I got in trouble one time on the show with our former co-host, Hella Holly, when I called Flo Rida. I called him Florida. The rapper. She was like, yeah, Florida, what are you talking about? The rapper? No, it's Flo Rida.
I'll tell you, like I said, not a lot of promotion, publicity for this card, which is a shame because this is a quality matchup, the main event. And I found out about it today because somebody said, good luck Kevin Farmer tonight. Kevin Farmer's fighting tonight? He's a Philly guy. I mean, it caught me off guard. It's the world title fight.
Right.
And then what made it even more intriguing is he's fighting Jojo Diaz, who's a once-beaten fighter, a very good fighter. And when I was in Las Vegas last year for the Canelo Alvarez-Danny Jacobs fight, Jojo Diaz fought on the undercard, scored a fourth-round knockout, and Kevin Farmer was there at the boxing fan convention that day. And he got in the ring, and they had some words. And so now this fight's been about a good 9-10 months in the making, and really no publicity about it at all. I mean, like I said, I'm a boxing guy, and I literally found out about it at about 3 o'clock today.
Yeah. And
I got home, and I'm like, there's a fight on tonight. And I looked on the paper, and I thought there was nothing on the cable channels.
Former guest of ours on the card, too.
So I'm like, well, it's got to be on one of the acts.
Who's that? Amanda Serrano. She already got the win.
She obliterated that girl. Second round.
Yeah.
Second or third round.
Looks
really
like kind of a tune-up opponent. But you never can tell with some of these women's records. But the girl she beat was 17 and 14. Right. And we also had another result. for the WBO Latino super middleweight title. Anthony Sims Jr. lost his first loss of his career.
I watched a couple rounds of that, and then
Alexis Angulo
had to step away for a little bit. And the first 3 rounds, I mean, he was using good moves and movement, but part of the art of boxing is to hit, and he really put that in his repertoire tonight. And my dad even said, he goes, if I want to watch dancing, I'll have Dick Clark bring back Bandstand. He goes, I mean, he was shucking and moving and footwork and angles and feinting and all that, but he was not punching. And that's kind of what you need to do to win a fight.
And of course, you probably didn't hear about this because the main fight on here, they don't have the result for some reason, but it was supposed to be on the undercard. It's Jake Paul versus Ali Ensign Gibb. They're both making their boxing debuts. And if you don't know who Jake Paul is, he's the other idiot's brother, Logan Paul, and he's already saying,
yeah, listen, he's one of these YouTubers.
Yeah, he's already saying he's better than his brother. And,
oh, good.
I don't know who this Gibb guy is. I have no idea, but they're trying to promote it like it's the next best thing. But I don't know if they're saving it for the co-main event or what's going on there with that one. But there's just a P next to it on the results, so maybe they didn't pass the P test.
Yeah, maybe.
It's a yellow P. Anyway, the next fight up, Daniel Roman, 27-2 with 1 draw against Murajan Akhmadaliev, who is 7-0. There's a couple titles on the line: the WBA Super World Super Bantamweight title and the International Boxing Federation World Super Bantamweight title. I get all of those titles with 2 supers in them. It's the Super World Super. The Super World Super Bantamweight title. How super is it, though? Really? Anyway, Demetrius Andrade also on the card. This is a big one. He is 28-0 at middleweight, fighting Luke Keeler, who's 17-2-1 for the WBO World Middleweight title. I don't know much about Keeler, but that's kind of a little bit of a mismatch on paper if you look at it, experience factor-wise, and the fact that Andrade is undefeated, but you just don't know enough about Keeler. He has not lost in his last 6 fights, but his 1 draw is his second to last fight, I think. Anyway, main event, as you talked about, Tevin Farmer versus Joseph Diaz. Tevin has 30 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw. That's his record. Joseph Diaz is 30-1. That's for the International Boxing Federation World Super Featherweight title. And this is a funny one. Especially considering the recent news, not so recent, but not too long ago, the news about Iran and the Quds Force guy that got killed by the missile strike. This guy happens to have his same first name. We got, could be the mismatch of the week, even though it's the guy's debut, like we did last week. Ryan O'Rourke. It's his debut at welterweight. This is in London, the United Kingdom. Well, they have a big issue with the Muslims over there, but anyway, Qasim Hussein. Great name. Great Muslim name, right? Qasim Hussein. He is 4-99 with 2 draws. So he's looking for his 100th loss. He's probably going to get. It's a pretty good guarantee.
It, I guess.
So I hope he doesn't have his whole Muslim following there with him. Getting ready to celebrate this 100th loss.
I think funny. It's like, yeah, I'm going. I think it's funny. It's like, hey, guys, going for his 100th win or 50th win or whatever. I'm going for my 100th loss.
Yeah.
Great. Congratulations. Good luck with that.
Yeah. And the co-main event is a guy who's 3-1 going against a guy who's 0-46. So the guy with 4 wins doesn't feel so bad.
Well, let me ask this. The guy with 0-46, isn't he have a draw in there?
Is his name what? Does he have a draw?
Not a draw.
No, no draw. 0, 46, and 0.
So he's literally lost
Every fight.
everything.
Yeah, everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, the ultimate opponent would be the guy who is 0 and whatever, and all of his losses are by knockout. I don't think that exists, but that would be funny.
If that guy was still getting licensed, that'd be a travesty.
How many times have you been knocked out? How many losses do I have? Yeah, that would be a bad one. Anyway, we're going to talk about it next week, but I just noticed last week before we got a chance to talk about it on the show, or after we got a chance to do the show, and we couldn't talk about it. Mark DeLuca has a big fight coming up. Talk about former guest of ours. He's fighting Kell Brook next week in the UK. It's a big step up. I mean, that's world class level. So we'll talk more about that next week, but I just thought I'd fill you guys in. And suddenly the Italian bazooka is coming back. So I've seen him reference that more often now. So maybe he's reclaiming that nickname. I always liked it better than whatever else he used. But anyway, he is.
So for a while, he was just doing it with the bazooka. And it's like, come on, get your ethnicity back in there.
Yeah. The Italian bazooka, DeLuca. So Saturday, February 1st. Day before the Super Bowl. Got a lot of fight action going on. While we're waiting for this to load, who do you guys like in the Super Bowl?
Well, I am pulling for the Chiefs. I'd like to see Andy Reid finally get his Super Bowl. But knowing Andy Reid for being in Philadelphia for 13 years, he does have a bad habit of choking in the big game.
Yeah.
I would like to see him win.
I think the Chiefs have a great chance, but I really
absolutely
like the defense of the 49ers. I think the 49ers are going to figure it out. But also, if you consider the money and the gamblers to be the experts on who's going to win, there was a story today that there was a $550,000 bet on the Chiefs that came in either today or yesterday.
Wow.
That absolutely changed the whole spread and everything. They went from 1 point spread to a 1.5 spread just because of this one bet.
Wow.
So, but they do say that they expect more 49ers money to come in towards the end of the week. So we'll see. We'll see. Should be interesting, though. As always, they'll be sure to have about 100 puns leading up to this in the sports analysis that are based on boxing. It's a slugfest! Anyway. Copenhagen, Denmark has a couple interesting fights this Saturday. It's going to be on Fight TV here in the United States. Brenda Karen Carbajal, featherweight. She's 16-4-1, fighting Sarah Mahfoud, who's 9-0 for the International Boxing Federation World Female Featherweight title. And then we got the IBF Youth Super Welterweight title on the line between Oliver Meng, 7-0, and Vasily Kurasov, who's 11-3. And there's an interesting fight here as the third supporting match. Jeppe Morel, who I never heard of, he's 10-2, but I have heard of this guy, Nikola Stekloka. He is 35-5-1 at the light heavyweight, so that should be a decent matchup there. Let's see what else we got on Saturday. There's one from Ghana. This is a tough one. Olen Riwaju Duradola at cruiserweight. He is 32-7, fighting Abraham Tabul, who's 16-2-1 for the vacant African Boxing Union Cruiserweight title. That's a good one. And here's one in Mexico, a one-fight card, and it's at minimum weight, a one-fight minimum weight card. I bet it'll go the distance. Pedro Tataran, he is 14-2, fighting Daniel Valadares, who is 22-1, and it's for the International Boxing Federation World Minimum Weight title. Minimum weight, what was that, 80 pounds?
Well, I know straw weight, which was the lightest weight, was 105. So you know how like some sanctioning bodies are called like junior middleweight, where other ones are called super welterweight. It could be the same thing: straw weight / minimum weight 105.
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking.
Well, it would be kind of a misnomer if it wasn't the lowest weight possible, and it's called minimum weight.
Right.
I do remember seeing that. I think they did change that years ago. I remember seeing that suddenly listed in the boxing magazines in like the 90s. So I think they added that after the fact when they figured out that there was a lot of skinny guys that like to fight. Anyway. We got some fights going on in Russia. There's a guy named Karen fighting. 15-1. Karen Chukadzeyan. And he's fighting Sergey Vorobiev. Unless it's a mixed gender fight here. I don't know. A guy named Karen. That's the first I've ever heard of that. Sergey Vorobiev is his opponent, 9-0, for the WBA International Welterweight title. And this might be the reason why he got into fighting, is because he's a guy named Karen.
Maybe.
Anyway, Samuel Carmona, flyweight. He's in the co-main event against Jose Antonio Jimenez. And Jimenez is 22-10-1. Carmona is 3-0. Jordanis Ugas against Mike Dallas Jr. in Biloxi, Mississippi. This is on Fox Sports 1. That's the main event there. Jordanis is 24-4. Mike Dallas Jr. is 23-3-2. So that should be entertaining. And
Mike Dallas did have a couple really significant losses in there, though. So it'll be interesting to see how much he truly has left.
Right. We also have Michael Rivera, 17-0, fighting Fidel Maldonado Jr., who's 27-4-1 for the vacant WBC Continental Americas lightweight title. And then Jose Miguel Borrego, 16-2, fighting Jimmy Williams, 16-3-2 at welterweight. And I guess this will be our Jesus fight of the week, since Jesus is undefeated. 11-0, Jesus Alejandro Ramos, fighting Ramal Amanoy, who is 16-1. So a little bit of experience factor going for Ramal, but Jesus walks on water, they say. So he's taking his undefeated record and his special skills in there. Anyway, Vicksburg, Mississippi. We got Rashid. I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. Akhzigatov. He's 10-0, fighting Willie Jake Jr., who's 8-3-1 for the vacant ABF Continental Americas heavyweight title. And here's, I guess, an interesting name. Super middleweight Chown Sims, Chown. Chown. You guys ever heard of a guy named Chown?
I have not.
Chown Sims. He is 4-1. And then you got to have a guy with a messed up name you're fighting. So he's fighting K, Eric Hinton. Not comma, apostrophe. Key Eric Hinton. Never heard of such a name freaking arrangement as that. Hinton is 4-1. It's just two weird names fighting each other. Just like, all right, let's get the guys with the weirdest names to fight each other. The vacant American Boxing Federation USA Mid-American Super Middleweight title is on the line. So don't make fun of their names. One of these guys is going to be a title holder at the end of the night. Jesus. This match of the week right here, too, on the same card. Michael Cook coming in at 12-0, fighting the ever-vicious Anthony Walker, who is 0-5. 0-5. That's rough. This is not televised, but we have an Austin Trout fight this week. Austin is 31-5 with 1 draw, and 3 of those losses have come in his last 6 fights, as well as the 1 draw. He looks like he's having a tune-up fight here against a guy who's lost more. 5 out of his last 6 fights. Rosbel Montoya, who is 17-9-1. So, also on the card, another guy with an undefeated record, having a sort of a tune-up fight here. Abel Mendoza, he is 21-0, fighting Juan Carlos Guillen, who is 8-6-1. And then we got another Jesus facing a little bit more incredible odds this week. At heavyweight, nonetheless. A heavyweight Jesus. That doesn't happen too often. Last week we had no Jesus fights. This week we got a heavyweight Jesus fight. Alonzo Butler. He's 31-3-2, facing Jesus Alberto Martinez Torres. A 4-name Mexican. Jesus is one of them. 23-13-1 is that Jesus' record. That about does it for the upcoming boxing schedule. I know we had Bellator that we never even introduced last week, but I don't have it up here in front of me. But we have Jones versus Reyes. That's not coming up until next week. But we got UFC Fight Night 166 here to recap. I couldn't get the feed figured out, so I didn't get to see it, but interesting to see that Curtis Blades handled Junior Dos Santos pretty well. Took him out in the second round.
On the feet. Yeah, Junior, his chin's gone. It's just gone. It's awful to see that.
Well, I mean, I have pointed out in the past on the show, watching his past performances, that he zombie fights a lot. And he gets away with it because he's just a tornado sometimes. But he's very bad at defending the face. Not that type. Precision type tornado like you are, Johnny. We're talking about a tornado that's just darting every which way. He doesn't know which path to take. That kind of tornado. And it's not, it is obviously from experience and practice and all that, and there was big criticism about them going full force in training and all that stuff. But Junior just does not block his face. Just never does, never has. And he just goes in with reckless abandon, and if he catches you on the button, he's got the reach usually, he's got the wherewithal to close the distance and shut you down. But there's a lot of times where to do that, he gets clipped a lot, and he'll be stumbling around the ring and still fighting. And I believe he did say it that he forgot an entire round. Just forgot it of a 5-round fight.
I know that feeling, unfortunately. I've had sparring sessions and fights that I don't remember good clips of. So that's not totally unusual.
Yeah. But he's a heavyweight, and it's way more dangerous at that level. So maybe he ought to follow his buddy and go over to professional wrestling. He might be a little better at that at this stage. But there's concussion risk there, too, so
Yeah,
you never know.
Yeah, but if you look at all the wars he's been through,
right.
I mean, those 2 Kane fights that he lost were some of the most brutal fights that I'd ever seen. And then his first fight was Stipe. If you look at the war that was.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's just it's gone. I mean, his chin. I just think and he's been around quite a while, and I think that he would have been more than. I think he would have handled Blades back in his prime, but his prime seems a distant memory.
Right. And Michael Chiesa, who has been around for a little while. He was actually the winner of the Ultimate Fighter tournament there. I believe it was the season where they did it live. They basically did the final fight a week after the season ended.
Yeah, I think that was. I think that was. Yeah, that was 2012, if I remember right.
Yeah, and he ended up facing Ally Quinta, who was all bruised up from his last fight in the house. And and believe it or not, Ally Quinta, as brutal and crazy and never stop action he brings to the cage, he has not been able to string together as many wins as Michael has in that same time period. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that he pissed off Dana White and just made the sister situation a little bit more miserable for himself because he kept getting thrown to the wolves. But Michael is an up-and-coming guy right now. He is definitely putting together some serious wins. And Rafael Dos Anjos is the next notch on his belt here. Got a unanimous decision win. I didn't get a chance to see it, but it definitely sounds like he handled him pretty well. And Dos Anjos has kind of been slipping too, but he's definitely one of those top contenders still. So it's a very big notch on the belt there.
Yeah, it was give and take, but let's just say the right guy won. I had it 2-1 for Michael. It wasn't a complete rout, but he won.
And Alex Perez didn't leave it up to the judges. He got a technical submission from an arm triangle choke over Jordan Espinoza. That was 2 minutes and 33 seconds for that one. And then Angela Hill. I did see her getting her hand raised, but that was the only thing I saw of this whole card. She beat Hannah Cyphers by elbow and punches from TKO, and that's another Ultimate Fighter girl. That was in the second round, by the way, 4 minutes and 26 seconds in. I don't know what season she was on, but she's been up and down too in her career, but definitely starting to put it together more lately. Jamal Hill got a win over Darko Stozic, also by unanimous decision. And Bavon Lewis, same result over Daquan Townsend. We had Arnold Allen getting a unanimous decision over Nick Lentz. Justine Kish, another female fight, getting a win over Lucy Pudilova by unanimous decision. I guess that was the theme of the night for this one. Montel Jackson in the fourth fight of the night, beating Felipe Diaz-Calares by unanimous decision. Sarah McMahon over Lena Landsberg by unanimous decision. And then the first couple fights of the night had different results. Brett Johns beat Tony Gravely by rear naked choke submission. It went down 2 minutes and 53 seconds into the third. And then a knockout knee was the end of the fight for Herbert Burns over Nate Landwehr. That was 2 minutes and 43 seconds into that fight. And let's see if we forgot anything here. Oh, we also just, I believe we just passed an anniversary. Something like that, or no? There was a story the other day that I saw. It wasn't anything to do with an anniversary, but a full in-depth story about the plane crash that killed Rocky Marciano. I don't know if you saw that, Tony. I don't know if I shared it on Facebook, but I saw that somewhere. And there was a lot of stuff that I didn't know. And one of the things that came out of it that I didn't know was the pilot who flew that flight. There's a lot of talk about he never should have taken off in the rainstorm. he wasn't experienced in that kind of weather or whatever. But it turns out he didn't have much experience flying, period. And, without instruments and all that, like, you're supposed to have so many 100 hours before you're allowed to even fly that way. So there was, like, a big investigation into that. And that guy basically should not have been in the air that night, period. He didn't even have many night hours by himself, because you're supposed to have so many with a trainer and then so many by yourself before you're supposed to be allowed to fly other people around. So anytime we get on this discussion, I always bring it back to Al Weil, who, if you know anything about Rocky, apparently made a deal where he got 50% of everything that Rocky made, even after he retired.
Yep.
So the story was, and a lot of his family is still bitter about this, that Rocky had to travel the world and do all these appearances so he could make cash money, because if they made a check out and it had to be reported, half of it would have to go to Al Weil.
Right.
So there are some people in his family who still blame Al Weil for the fact that Rocky died in a plane crash, because he would have never been out there if he had all the
And
money.
you know what? I mean, I remember reading stories, about Rocky, where they would say he would go to an event and they would say, "Hey, we're going to pay you, here's a check for $5,000." He'd be like, "No, tear it up." He'd be like, "I'll pay cash for $2,500," because he knew he would get the same amount, but he was basically doing like the ultimate FU to Al Weil.
Yeah.
Saying like, "You know what? I'm going to get the same amount, but I want to make sure you get nothing."
Now, this is a sad story. I know there was supposed to be, there was a Bellator event last week. I didn't look it up yet. I think it was Bellator 238 was the number. But I don't know how true this is. It's kind of in a broken English website here. But there's something about the main event being called off because Rafael Lovato has been revealed to have a brain tumor. And it is supposedly, according to this article, benign, but he'll have to have surgery, and it's affected him physically. So yeah, that's crazy news. I'm surprised that hasn't been circulated more, but it just came across in the MMA alert today. So I don't know a lot about it, whether it's a hoax or it's a bad translation or what's going on there, but. Hopefully that's not too serious and he can still fight, because he is a big part of their organization. And Tommy Coyle, you might have heard of him, a boxer, has announced his retirement. So British boxing. So I don't know if he's a superstar, but he's very popular over in the UK. Tommy Coyle. We'll get that in a minute to load up here.
Well, before, because I know I'm going to be jumping off a little bit because I want to get on catch this Kevin Farmer fight. But I do want to do a quick recap of the boxing events last week.
Sure. Go for
it. From Brooklyn. Well, we had a 3-fight card at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. And headlined by Danny Garcia. Danny beat Ivan Redkach, unanimous decision. Redkach actually got fined today, and I don't know if he's getting suspended or not, for biting Garcia in about the 8th or 9th round.
And he said Mike Tyson at the same time, right?
Yeah. And you know what's funny? They were like, and everybody started invoking Mike Tyson. Oh my God, Tyson. Well, Tyson was the most famous one, but Tyson by far was, far from the only one. I remember Andrew Galata bit Samson Pawuwa on Tuesday Night Fights. I remember watching it in college. I'm like, he just bit the guy. So it's happened before.
Jumbo Cummings, that I believe he bit Eddie Mustafa Muhammad.
It's crazy.
No, Reginald Snipes. Yeah, he beat Reginald Snipes, and Reginald Snipes screamed. Yeah, that was just classic. Yeah, right. Something about that. Something so primal.
Was if you, and this book came out before the fight, as they call the Tyson Holyfield rematch. And I had a friend and teammate of mine from Lock Haven that was there. Flew out to Vegas for that. We were talking the other day at work how things are so crazy with the times now. And I said, I remember being in Lock Haven with this guy, Fred. We were teammates and friends. And he was, in Lock Haven, obviously, if you wanted to read one of the larger newspapers, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the New York Post, or anything like that, you would have to, go to the library. And I remember Fred would go to the library, and then he would make copies of the classifieds, and that's how he would look to see what the travel packages were for trips to Las Vegas. So I remember him sitting there with me one day because he was going out to place at Holyfield too, and he had a copy, and he had about 4 or 5 circled, and he goes, okay, here's a flight, the package, say it's at Caesar's Palace, and this one is going to be, say, 600. And this one's going to be flight and package at, the Bellagio, and it's going to be, $750. And he had all the circled and all that. But before that fight happened, Evander Holyfield's book came out, and he was talking about in the amateurs, and the first time he either got knocked down or stunned in a fight or, whatever, but he bit his opponent on the shoulder. And I'm like, wow, karma's a bitch, ain't it? But with regard to the Garcia fight, I think Danny took off the gas pedal in that last few rounds. He had red catch. I think where he won them a couple times. He landed some good shots. He had him bruising. He had him abrased, but he got off the gas pedal and he coasted the last 3 rounds and didn't press for the knockouts. So I don't know if maybe he was getting fatigued in there or hurt his hand or something, because he, went from, landing some good power shots and looked like he was pressing for a stoppage to, what, I'm built enough of a lead, I'm just going to coast on the cards. Jared Hurd, first fight back after losing his title a few months ago, and pedestrian performance, against the fighter he could have looked good against, and he really looked mediocre out there at best. He was trying to incorporate more boxing into his style now, and I think he's almost caught between 2 styles. Does he want to be that aggressive power puncher, or does he want to be more of a hit and don't get hit boxer? It looked like he was confused out there at times. He finally scored the knockdown with about maybe 12 seconds to go, and then he won the decision. Then in the first fight of the night, which was another Philadelphia product, Stephen Fulton Jr. Won a unanimous decision and boxed very well. And I've seen Stephen fight live at the Valley Forge Casino. He's a thinking man fighter, highly skilled, likes to use his jab, a lot of movement, not much of a puncher. He won the majority of the rounds. The only real drama in that fight is when the opponent, I'm butchering his name, so I'm not even going to try, started getting a little dirty, and at one point threw a body slam in there, an actual body slam, and one of my friends was in the crowd, and my friend Simon Carr. Rich, remember Simon Carr?
Yeah.
Who forgets Simon Carr? Simon was in the crowd wearing a yellow shirt and a yellow hat. You couldn't miss him. And Simon got up and he was throwing a fit. And I'm like, I actually texted him today and I was like, you look good on TV the other night throwing a fit. The whole broadcast could see you.
That's funny.
Tony, you nailed it though, and I was agreeing with you on the Garcia fight that it's there's levels, and red catch is just not there, and it looked to me like the fight was kind of predetermined. I mean, I'd been eating some melatonin brownies, strange thing for a fight. And I kept trying to stay awake, and and I think I actually nodded off through the bite.
Yeah.
and then I came back in the 10th round, and it was just pretty much of a replay. So, yeah, Danny was the boss. I mean, he just completely dominated as well, but he didn't get the stoppage.
Right, exactly.
And it just, and I kept wondering, well, I mean, I know Red Catch was durable, but Red Catch just really had nothing for him. I mean, it was just a preordained fight. You know, supposedly Red Catch was going to come in and mix it up. Well, Danny just slept off his punches, and but it was just kind of anticlimactic in a sense. And yeah, I agree with you. I think I caught some of the Hurd fight, and I was going back and forth between the UFC, had them both on. But I think, yeah, with Hurd, you're right. He's just like caught between two and make up their mind what you want to do.
Maybe Red Catch had some of your melatonin brownies before the fight, too.
Maybe.
Yeah, that was... yeah.
That sounds like something you give to your boss when you want to go home early. Hey, boss, here's some melatonin brownies.
I know. You know, I mean, and I was hoping that there'd be some action to keep me going. And really, the Dos Santos fight had a little more suspense, but with... not knocking any of it. I mean, it's just he definitely. I don't know. I'd be hard pressed to give Red Catch more than a couple rounds, but yeah, that should have been a stoppage, really.
Yeah,
just kind of a boring,
bit of it.
boring grab.
I didn't really watch a bunch of rounds, but I did tune in for a little while. It was pretty decent.
Well, you got to try that. You guys got to try that. Just get a brownie mix and just do it like regular brownies and get about 100 milligrams of melatonin in there. It'll knock you out, you know. Give it a try.
I just was like, all right, did he just say melatonin brownies? Is he serious? Like, why would you do that?
Yes, yes.
The only thing I would think of, why would you do that, is like to confuse somebody, to trick them.
Well, it was a fad, about 10 years ago. Then they quit selling them, but so I just make my own now. And you can get these 10 milligram, which you don't want to take before you go to bed. You don't need that. I mean, if you take melatonin, all 3 milligrams is fine. But you can get them in 10 milligram capsules, and then I
gotta make another joke at somebody's expense for this. But did Bill Cosby teach you that recipe?
Oh, well,
easiest way to get a girl to sleep with you: give her some melatonin brownies.
Necrophilia is not my thing.
Okay, all right. Oh, that's funny. All right. Well, yeah, that about wraps it up for last week. Those were the biggest fights. We also had some guys, I can't even pronounce their names, but I got some wins. Batarzan Jukumbayev got a big win over Ricardo Laya. Abbas Barao over Abraham Juarez. Stephen Fulton over Arnold Kagai. Artem Harutyunin beat Miguel Cesario Antine. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but Kell Brook versus Mark DeLuca. That's going to be the big one we're going to be talking about next week.
And then also another little inside tip I read about Tyson Fury in his preparation for the Wilder fight. He said, I'm not making this up, he is masturbating 5 times a day.
I heard this.
His testosterone levels up.
I heard this.
Unbelievable. I mean, I had never heard those two things in that same connotation before.
I have some insight on this, believe it or not, okay? Because there was a show that studied all different scientific aspects of fighting and everything like that. And they actually tackled this on one of their episodes, whether having sex before a fight affects your performance, good or bad. And they basically noticed no effect. And well, there was like some slight indication that it actually helped your workout levels, your testosterone levels. But then there was more studies done, and they determined that it does not change a thing. It has no effect whatsoever. So I don't know.
Yeah, and everyone I've talked to, and everyone I've the studies I've heard, going back to the 70s and 80s, the theory behind it is it's not the sex that is damaging, it's the running around, it's the taking them shopping, it's putting traction from the training.
Right.
That's the problem. That's the problem. It's not the sex itself. It's not much of an effect. So I don't know where this crazy bastard came up with the idea that that's going to preserve it and boost his testosterone. You know, you got to love a guy like that. What a complete... You just don't know what he's going to do. I mean, again, if you're not fascinated by Tyson Fury, I don't know. You don't have a pulse. I mean, I just can't wait. And we'll talk about... I don't want to get ahead of it because there's so much we'll be talking about that fight. I'm just going back and forth on it now. I could see nothing would surprise me.
Right. Getting back to the bite situation with Red Catch, Garcia actually explained in the post-fight interview, yeah, he bit me. He said Mike Tyson when he bit me. I said, ref, he bit me. I thought I'd need stitches or something. That's my first time ever getting bit in a fight. Things happen, though. I've been in a street fight before, so I did it all. And Red Catch did not make any attempt to deny the incident, of course. Garcia added later on, I just felt something digging into my skin. I thought a mosquito had got me. Then I look over, and he's biting me. And this is the best part. This is the best. This part reminds me of Henry Corrales. He has new teeth, too. He's got some brand new veneers. He was putting them bad boys to work.
Damn.
So, yeah, when you get new teeth and you want to use them, you might get fined if you're trying to buy.
Well, that was a pretty insulting thing Danny said about Red Catch's biting ability. He thought a mosquito was...
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to bite someone, at least get their attention better than a mosquito. It's terrible.
I saw that
fight.
Up here in, actually, speaking of Mark DeLuca, the last place he lost was to our former guest at the Bank of New Hampshire Pavilion up here in Guilford, next town over. I should have been there, but I didn't get a chance to get in there with the press passes, so I said forget about it. But yeah, Walter Wright was the guy we had on the show, and then he beat him. And then DeLuca turned around and rematched him. And it was in Boston. Guess what? He got a unanimous decision. And he got his belt back. But yeah, over in Guilford, we had an MMA fight one night, years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago now. And I believe Calvin Qatar was involved with that promotion. But anyway, the main event had a fighter get bit by a mosquito right in the middle of the cage. And he slapped it, and then the blood was on his leg and everything. Got a big laugh out of the crowd. But because it was an outdoor venue, you know, they had a pavilion, is what it was called, you know, so they got like a roof and everything in case it rains, but the whole cage is outdoors, you know, so it's a whole new dynamic when you got in the middle of the summer up here, you got the bugs coming at you, because they got the lights right out in the middle of all the people, instead of what they usually have, the stage is up higher and all the people are down at the lower level and the bugs get them, you know. But yeah, that was bad. Anyway, I guess that's all our information for tonight. Till next week, we're going to wrap it up here. And we're going to work really hard on getting a guest next week. Because for some reason, today I discovered I have 4 gigabytes worth of space when I didn't do anything to create it. So that's somewhat of a mystery. I might never figure out, but... I was going onto the computer today and I was thinking, geez, I'm going to have to erase stuff from last week to make room for the show this week because I only had like a gigabyte worth of space. So I was worried about doing shows with guests because until I figure out the space thing, where am I going to put all this information and content? So I go on there today and all of a sudden I look and I got 4 gigabytes when I had like 600 megabytes the other day. And I'm like, what the hell did I do? But, yeah. One of those weird mysteries. If it was, I don't know, see how it could be connected, but it was like the other day, the only thing I could think of is, you know, I hooked up my dad's computer, and I hadn't used his computer because it was password protected, right? So I didn't know the password. And there's no way around it, really. You have to like do this complicated process to get by the password in Windows 10, I guess it is, on his computer. So I set it up and everything like that, and there was this technical kid that had advertised online that he could fix computers. So I texted him, and we were supposed to sit down and go through the process, and then he said, "Oh, it's Windows 10. I don't think I can do that." So it was like one of those situations where it was like, man, this is weird. This is crazy the way it happened. So I set the computer up, and then nothing ever came of it. I couldn't get past the password screen, but I left it on. And then today, just sit down at my computer, and all of a sudden, all this free space. So it's like, my dad came in and fixed all the clutter. From another world. I don't know. That's the only explanation I can think of. But I literally did nothing to cause that. Like, I didn't erase anything, or, it's just weird. I didn't even reset the computer.
Strange.
And that's a lot of space. Like, I think there's like 65 gigabytes on the whole drive, and I've got 4 now, and I only had like less than half a gigabyte, or a little over half a gigabyte the other day. So, yeah. And there was one incident right on the way to the funeral where my girlfriend's phone actually decided to instead of like doing the directions on Google, it repeated something I said in the conversation about my family. I was saying something about, I'm not mad about, this family feud that was going on or whatever between my sisters and I about some bullshit. And then the phone repeated it back like a minute later. I'm not mad. So me and my girlfriend were joking like, geez, this is kind of like communication from beyond or something. Like, maybe that's him coming through the device. And there are a lot of paranormal things connected with electronics, so it's kind of one of those things that makes me think, like, Jesus, is this, because it's like... Yeah,
I've had a few of those, too, after my father's passing, and some of that stuff can just make the hair in the back of your neck stand up.
Yeah, but, yeah, that's true. Odd paranormal activity story of the week. Yeah, who knows? He's helping me out. From the great beyond.
Yeah. Well, I guess we can end the show by telling Tyson Fury to keep on Jack.
Yeah.
I wonder what his wife thinks of him saying that.
I don't know if he is married. That'd be tough.
Well, he's a maniac. And he said... And he said he's going to be more aggressive, and it was brought to his attention that when you fight Deontay Wilder, you may be fighting, you're definitely fighting one of the hardest punchers in boxing history. Maybe I don't know. I mean, who knows? But my God, that man, that one punch, I mean, that's like a 105-mile-an-hour fastball.
Yeah.
And he just said, well, I'm in a dangerous business.
Yeah. He's going to dance a little bit more this time, probably. Yeah. A lot of head movement. Yeah.
Yeah, so this other... Well, I've got to get a melatonin brownie. I got another full house tomorrow.
All right. Well, good luck with the taxes.
So, gentlemen...
Don't take any shit from Uncle Sam.
Oh, yeah. I got to get going with Intuit, the TurboTax thing. You see those commercials. Talk to a live CPA if you're having trouble. So I'm behind a camera for 8 to 10 hours on my private clients, and it's burning the candle, but we'll get through it. What's the old saying? Like Hank was telling Tony, don't lose the fight in the dressing room.
Yeah.
Keep positive, believe it.
Well, I will probably need your services by this time next year, because I'll have the big, the probate will be gone through, and I'll have that situation to deal with tax-wise next year.
Yeah.
So. I might be on one of those calls.
Okay, well,
we'll cross that bridge when we come.
I'll do everything I can do to help.
All right.
Okay, so next week it will be, and hopefully I'll have the time to do what I can. And well, we're not. Melatonin brownie time, and then knockout.
All right.
Let's enjoy the fight.
All right, take it easy.